Rwanda, a small country landlocked in East Africa, is risen from infamous and very tragic event going back to 1994, which came to be known as the Rwandan genocide. This took a lot of energy from the people of Rwanda, for the leadership to rebuild the country, to get it where it is. Rwanda has traveled a long road. Today, despite its size, it's a small country, as I said, a population of nearly 14 million. Rwanda continues to punch way above its weight. Rwanda has also faced a lot of challenges, particularly on the front of security. It has to struggle with the relationship with its neighbors. It's a highly functional country that contributes quite a bit to peace and security around the world, particularly through the United Nations, sending peacekeepers and other security programs across Africa and sometime beyond. Some issues still remain. The country is building its national cohesion, issues of human rights that often the country grapple with, particularly with its partners in the West and sometimes international organization. The country is also, as I said, is multidimensional, issue of technology where the country is on the cutting edge, different platforms that they've created. Joining me today to discuss some of those issues is General James Kabarebe, who is Minister for State for Foreign Affairs and in charge of regional cooperation. General Kabarebe, welcome to Into Africa.
Thank you.
Your country, Rwanda, has traveled a long way, and you have been part of that journey from the beginning. As a young man, you were part of the group that had launched the offensive to come back to Rwanda, bringing the various Rwandan refugees who were scattered around the region and beyond. You also eventually became the chief of defense of the DRC after Rwanda had invaded or joined the coalition that came to be known as FDL. You serve as CDS of your country here. Now you are in this new position, dealing particularly with regional cooperation. Can you talk a little bit about your own assessment of the road that your country has traveled today?
Thank you so much. Rwanda has traveled a long way, gone through a lot, confronted a lot, but also paved the way and remained consistent to its main objective of developing and moving ahead. You mentioned it. Rwanda has gone through a lot of episodes, historical episodes. There is the colonial aspect, the post-colonial aspect, and the post-1994 genocide against the Tutsi. All these episodes, they left landmarks, some ramifications to our country. The colonial perspective, of course, as you mentioned it, left Rwanda small, landlocked, most of its territories taken away, and weakened a bit. The same history, colonial history, left Rwanda a divided society, made Rwanda a divided society, a bipolar society that culminated into the 1959 genocide. You can call it genocide. Upheavals that saw many Rwandans, Tutsi ethnic group, persecuted, fleeing all over this region. And the post-colonial Rwanda, the elitist leaders who came into power, they entrenched the same genocide ideology, continued to divide our society, and this culminated into the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. By 1990, there was this momentum by many Rwandan youth that had been scattered all over the region because of these historical upheavals that had been condemned to refugee status for almost 30 years. They regrouped and sought to come back to Rwanda to liberate the country from that elitist genocidal group that was mismanaging our country through many, psychic killings, harassments of our people. Rwanda was not a country to, talk about. So after 1994, then Rwanda embarked on the journey of reconstruction, post-genocide reconstruction, building institutions, strong institutions, building a system that works, governance system that works, reuniting our people, and then embarking on the economic development path. I think after 30 years now, we have registered some progress, but of course, as you said, with the challenges also. The challenges that do not only concern Rwanda, but many even other regional and African countries. There are certain challenges that we all share. But we have seen Rwanda pave her way through and registering some progress.
This journey of rebuilding a country after the genocide took a lot of strength. It will take a lot of leadership, but it's also costly. Mm-hmm. What, in your mind, having served in the various capacities that you have been some of those key challenges, and how have you tackled those as a country?
Well, the challenges were many and varied, but you can pick some of the most important ones. First and foremost, after the 1994 genocide against Tutsi, the first challenge was to reunite our people. I may say it was a challenge, but it was workable and it was successful and it was done. It was easily done. And this worked out to be the basis for our strength today. After reuniting our people, uniting Rwandans, this became a basis for our strength. Where another challenge that we still grapple with, mainly that I personally see as a challenge, is the attitude of the international community and some of the responses. There are some positives, there are some good aspects. Of course, we could not have developed without the support of the international community in general. Through good collaborations with international community, we have achieved something. But on the other aspect of the international community, some attitude and responses has been pulling back our energy, especially as you said about, some allegations, accusations, negative reporting, projecting Rwanda the way it is not, it drains some energy and in a way does not help our development.
But at the same time, General, Rwanda is reportedly considered as a darling of the West, of the international community. You don't see that way?
I don't see it that way. It depends on who says it, but a darling of the West in a way that maybe we have mastered the way to deal with it without, allowing it to be a problem, but instead, looking forward and getting the best out of it. But I don't think Rwanda is a darling of the West, and
it doesn't feel that way from here.
No, that's not our feeling. We strive to work with everyone.
Speaking of working with everyone, Rwanda is in a tough neighborhood. A neighborhood with tremendous potential, but a neighborhood, and I'm speaking of the Great Lakes, in this case, North Africa at large, that has been prone to conflict. Your own history of Rwanda, as you just described, the diaspora, the refugees, of course, in the case of part of the diaspora of Rwanda, taking matters in their own hand to try to change their circumstances. But you still have to grapple with your neighbors. So Rwanda has had friction pretty much with all their neighbors, with Burundi, with Tanzania, with DRC, and then with Uganda, where you closed the borders for a long time. What is that about? Why is a country that is building its own national unity, its own national citizenship, so to speak, and national cohesion, and projecting everything that you just mentioned, is still struggling to strike the right balance with the neighbors?
I don't think it is true that we are struggling to strike balance with our neighbors. We have had good relationships with our neighbors. We have not had any problem with Tanzania, for example. With Uganda, it has been on and off, but we have a very long history of and a very strong relationship, historical relations with Uganda. Even with a few skirmishes that have taken place, they have been easily overcome and easily because they are not. There's nothing fundamental that is difficult to deal with between us and Uganda. So with Uganda, we are okay, and we have been fine. Even with Burundi, it has not been very difficult for a very long time. Burundi, we only had the recent skirmishes originating from their own internal problems. Then 2015 coup d'etat, where most of their people fled here, and we disarmed them, cantoned them, and we still have them. And so there is nothing deep, nothing difficult with Burundi that cannot be settled. So it's not true. It's maybe a perception that Rwanda struggles to live with her neighbors, but it's not true. Generally, we have had a very good relationship with our neighbors, except with our neighbor to the west, the DRC.
Yeah, Jenna, we'll come to the DRC. I just want to beg your indulgence to stay a little bit on Burundi and Uganda. So both of those countries are in many ways sister countries to Rwanda.
Sure.
Yeah, the long history that exists between Uganda and Rwanda. You grew up there. A lot of the leaders in this country grew up there. So it's home for many of you. Uganda is home for many of you. So how home becomes such a challenge where you close the door to home? So there have to have been some challenges where you close the door to your other home.
Even with brothers in the same family, sometimes they have their own squabbles. The most important thing is what is the basis for that and how do you overcome it? So with Uganda, there is nothing deep. There is nothing fundamental. There is nothing very difficult. You may have a quarrel today and tomorrow you overcome it. And based on that relationship, historical ties, culture, everything, that is a good basis for you to,
So today,
overcome
where is
it.
that relationship?
Today, the relationship with Uganda is perfect. It's quite excellent.
And Burundi is literally your twin.
Yeah.
The culture makeup, the
Language.
history, language, traditions. So how do we go from that to the skirmishes that you're referring to?
Yeah, with Burundi, as I said earlier, Burundi, historically, we have not had any problems with Burundi. It only started recently in 2015 when they had a coup d'etat and their people fled to Rwanda. And the situation was also aggravated by Burundi's choice recently to join the DRC government to fight in the eastern DRC, to fight against the M23, and to join the DRC that also incorporates or integrates the former genocidal forces, the FDLR, within their forces. So for us, we saw that as a betrayal on the part of Burundi. Burundi joining the forces of the DRC that incorporate the genocidal forces. It brought up an ideological connotation to the conflict. I mean, how does a neighbor like Burundi that knows what happened here in 1994, that knows that the DRC government incorporates or includes the FDLR, the genocidal forces amongst their military, and they joined them. So to us, that caused some frost, but with Burundi, we can still talk. We are even talking today. We can talk, and we know at a time we are going to iron it out.
How are those talks going?
The talks are bilateral at different levels. At least we meet, we talk, and we believe that Burundi has interest in opening borders. Rwanda did not close the borders. Burundi closed the borders. So we believe that they have an interest in opening the borders and, having good collaboration with us. Rwanda has been open to them. And we believe, I think it will not take so long.
But the Burundians allege that you are holding some of the people who tried the coup in 2015. You have given them shelter. They also think you are supporting, you meaning Rwanda, supporting the dissident on their part.
That's not true. At least as of recent, Burundi has not brought up that allegation against us about supporting anybody against them. For holding the coup plotters, where would we put them? We have them. We could hand them over to Burundi. They know. We have even discussed about it and even modalities of how to hand them over. But you cannot just hand over people without any guarantees that, whatever happens to them will not be used against you. So that is where we are. If we can get guarantees, the third party or whoever handing over the coup plotters is a simple thing. It's something we agreed, in principle with them.
And what is missing at this point is the guarantee for the safety of those people. Is that what I hear?
I think it's for Burundi to take the lead and say, okay, these are the guarantors, and then we can hand over the people.
Burundi, Rwanda, DRC, Uganda are all members, Tanzania member of the East Africa community, which means these countries have reached some agreement to live in peace, cohabitate in the region, collaborate. You are the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, but in charge of regional integration. Why is that integration not working as well in this regard?
integration, multilateralism is a process. It's not something that you achieve overnight. We have what is working in terms of integration. We have the common market, we have the customs union, we have, so these mechanisms are working. We are moving to a monetary union, we are moving to a political federation. The discussions and the process is still going. So building multilateralism is not something you can do overnight. It's a whole process. But definitely there are so many benefits accrued out of the integration of the East African community, at least all members. And you can see the membership has increased from 3 originally to 4 or 5. Now we are 7, including Somalia and South Sudan, Burundi, and DRC.
In that process, security continues to be the biggest challenge, if I may say so. So just from what we just discussed with Burundi, the closing of border with Uganda, and now we go to the DRC, which you intimately were involved with. What is the state of your relations with the DRC beyond the FDLR issue? I understand the DRC issue is a sine qua non for Rwanda, but the relationship is much bigger than that. How do you assess the state of this relationship?
With the DRC, normally, we have a history together, and we should be friends. And there's nothing difficult for us to be friends. There is a basis for us to be really friends. In history will provide you with what you will pick on to make friendship or even destroy friendship. It's a matter of choice. Let me take you back to the history of Rwanda and the DRC. In 1923, after the defeat of the Germans during the First World War, the then Rwandan army that was allied to the German army that fought the British and the Belgians that were coming from the West, that army in 1923, the Rwandan army was disbanded by the Belgians, totally disbanded. And who took over? It was the Belgian army and the Congolese army.
Force publique.
The Force publique. The Force publique of the Congolese and the Belgians, they took over from 1923 in Rwanda and in fact in Burundi. The Belgian commander, Colonel Rogist, who was in Kisangani, deployed in Rumangabo and deployed in Rwanda and also in Burundi. So Rwanda lived under the Congolese army, the Force publique, from 1923 up to 1963, when the first Rwandan military officers graduated. So that is how many years? 40 years.
The Garde Nationale, is that what you call it? Garde.
But Rwanda has nothing to complain about that because it's history. It's our history. It's the colonial history. That's what it had for us. And but we had the Force publique of the Congolese army here. Most of the clerks.
In this case, we call it the Belgian colonial army.
The Belgian colonial army, but with the Congolese as part of it. Most of the clerks, the administrators, the clerks, you may call civil service or whoever, most of them were Congolese here. They were Congolese. From Kasai, from Katanga, from where? So we have a history together. In 1959, when there was that first genocide against the Tutsi, the exodus of the Tutsis and the refugee problems within the region, most Rwandans fled to Zaire, to Congo, others to Tanzania, others to Burundi, others to Uganda. So Congo, the DRC hosted our people. They benefited from education, they benefited from, they grew up, there was no problem. So that is the history together. There is what you can pick in history that will, create some bondage between you and you live together apart from being natural neighbors. So even that history, if you used it well, it is a good basis for people to live together. In 1990, when the RPF, the Rwandese Patriotic Front, and its military wing, the Rwandese Patriotic Army, attacked Rwanda from Uganda, we were part of the Ugandan army. When we broke out and attacked Rwanda to regain to have our people who had been refugees for 30 years come back, to change the course of history here, to change so many things, governance and others, to liberate our country. Mobutu, we attacked on the 1st of October 1990. By the 5th of October 1990, Mobutu intervened to fight us, to fight refugees who were returning to their own country. Intervened with a whole division, the Division Spéciale Présidentielle, the DSP. It was commanded by Colonel Mayeri and another Major Nabioro.
Still alive now, General. Yes.
Yes. Mayeri died in 1996, 7. So Mobutu intervened and fought on the side of the genocidal government, on the side of the government that was persecuting us. In other words, he fought on the side of the Habyarimana regime, the genocidal regime, to stop us from liberating our own country. And I think this also forms part of the strains, the quarrel we have today. That's where it starts from. So the whole of October, we were fighting the Congolese army in the eastern part of our country. At that time, maybe Mobutu was intervened on the side of the genocidal force because he was very close to the leadership here. So at that point, the DRC government clearly identified itself with the genocidal regime.
In 1990, will you already speak of the genocide in 1990? In 1990, that is 4 years before the big event, the climax. But will you use that term retroactively to 1990?
Yeah, for me, I would use the term from 1959 because from 1959, the Tutsis were targeted. They were systematically killed. 1963, they were killed. 1973, they were killed. 1990, they were killed. 1994 was just a climax. So genocide was not overnight. It was a build-up from the events of 1959. So for me, I would prefer to use it to call that regime that committed genocide in 1994 as a genocidal regime that Mobutu supported in 1990. So after 1994, when the genocide was stopped by the Rwandese Patriotic Army here and the RPF, of course, the genocidal force, all of it equipped government, military, migrated to the DRC, to Eastern DRC. The Zairian government then, Mobutu government, received them, settled them along our border. Just a few kilometers, sometimes less than a kilometer from the border, established the camps. But even before 1994, or during the genocide, Mobutu had also given access and way to the French intervention force known as Zone Turquoise. It was based in Kindu, it was based in Bukavu, and it used Zaire as an entry point into Rwanda to support the genocidal regime. So you can see how Zaire, DRC, comes into play in all this history of genocide. So from 1994 to 1996, the genocidal forces, militias and government forces that had been received by Mobutu along our border, the whole stretch, western stretch, very close to the border, 1994, 95, they had started incursions into Rwanda. They had started entering Rwanda, killing our people again, selectively killing the Tutsis that had been saved or had survived the 1994 genocide. But at the same time, the genocidal forces that crossed into Zaire in 1994, on reaching there, they found other people, Congolese, similar to Tutsis that they had killed here in Rwanda. So they embarked on them and also persecuted them and killed them. Some of them made their way and came to Rwanda, went to Burundi, went to Uganda for refuge. That was 1994. All of those are still refugees since then in these countries. Since then, those who survived, these are Congolese of Tutsi culture and origin. So this also lays basis for the current conflict. So this conflict has a history. If you go back to the roots of what really transpired, what happened, that's how you clearly
That's how we got here.
get the true figure of what happens.
But on that, General, so come 96, 97, within the event that you just described, providing the context, eventually Rwanda is part of the coalition of armies that march all the way to Kinshasa.
Yes.
You become the CDS, so to speak, of the Congolese army. The Congolese army had collapsed. The Zaire army had collapsed, and there's the new force that comes. So Rwanda has been involved in Congo in different forms because of different issues that you saw well highlighted. Those issues, that involvement, on some front it helped, in some front it did not help. It created its own dynamics. You're a man of security, a man of war. So, war itself has its own dynamics. We cannot always control where it leads. Taken where you remember from 96, 97, 98, the RCDs, the MLC, all the breakup that we saw in DRC, today Rwanda is accused. The UN, the US say Rwanda is behind the M23. The M23 say they're addressing the issue you highlighted, the root causes, as you call them. How are those processes working, if they are working? Why achieving peace between the two countries is so difficult? You said these are brothers, these are community, they should be, sometimes they're different, they should help. What is missing?
For me, achieving peace between the DRC and Rwanda and the region itself, even the Eastern DRC itself, is not a difficult thing. It is the easiest thing that can be fixed, that can be dealt with if there was good political will on the part of the government of Kinshasa. It would not be very difficult. You are talking of Rwanda intervening in 1996, but I earlier talked of DRC intervening in Rwanda in 1923 up to 63 and 1990. So we should also put this correct, that it's not Rwanda that intervened in DRC before, it's DRC that intervened in Rwanda before.
Yes, but General, who said the Belgian did, right? So,
yeah, but in 1994,
in 1990,
it was not the Belgians.
23 to 660, that's Belgium. That's colonial. The same way the Askaris from different countries were in different countries.
Yeah.
But yes, from 1990,
but also 1994, receiving, settling, rearming, giving base to the genocidal forces, the FDLR, Arir, and then the FDLR. This was done by the Congolese government. And this led to Rwanda's intervention in the DRC in 1996. If, for example, the genocidal forces that crossed into Zaire in 1994 were disarmed, were separated from the refugees, were not allowed to re-enter Rwanda and to kill our people, there would not have been any intervention into Zaire in 1996. No, genocidal groups, genocidal forces, military and militias, they crossed into Tanzania in 1994. All those that crossed into Tanzania were disarmed at our border with Tanzania at Rusumo. The arms were handed over back to us. The fighters and the refugees were separated. The refugees were taken several kilometers away from our border. We had no problem with Tanzania over the refugees and over the militia groups. So why didn't the similar situation happen with Zaire? It has that background of 1990, that background of the Zone Turquoise, that background of the Zairian army having been close and allied to the genocidal army here. That's why in 1994, they were received in camps close to our border, stayed with their arms, in fact, rearmed, trained, recruited within camps, and helped by the Zairian army to re-infiltrate into Rwanda to continue with the genocide. So Rwanda was left with no choice except to move into the DRC and to dismantle the camps, to return the refugees and to separate them from the FDLR, the genocidal forces. And in the process, of course, Mobutu intervened on the side of the genocidal forces. If we had left Rwanda to deal with its own people, the camps and the militias, Mobutu would not have had any problem with us. But his intervention and also bringing in the mercenaries to attack Rwanda, remember the Bosnian mercenaries, he escalated the war and he ended up losing the war in the process.
But on that point, General, Turquoise, Alir, Exfar, true. All those are factual.
Yeah.
It's also factual that there was an international layer, international failure. Right? So the camps were not disarmed, refugees were not settled 12 miles within the country as opposed to the border. At the time, UNHCR did not take a strong stance. The French were behind Operation Turquoise. But you've made up with the French. It took a long time, but you have strong relationship now, at least the way it's seen from outside. You are better positioned to know if it's strong or not. If that can happen, why can't Rwanda and DRC, given all the fact that you just laid out, still get to the peaceful point that will benefit both countries?
That's a very good question. If it can happen with the French, with all they did to us, why can't it happen with the DRC? Yes, the French is a nation state, fully functional, its governance structures and everything, leadership. They know what they want, they know the importance of peace. This has not happened with the DRC. The biggest problem with the DRC today is not even the issue of M23. M23 is a repercussion of, a ramification of all that history. The DRC has made one strategic mistake, especially the leadership, the various leaderships of DRC after 1994-96. For them to have chosen and constructed an anti-Rwanda, particularly anti-Tutsi sentiment, and used it as a political tool to gain legitimacy of the Congolese population, so that they have chosen to label everything, all their failures, all their problems of the DRC as being caused by Rwanda. So this anti-Rwanda, particularly anti-Tutsi narrative construct, they have adopted as a political tool to win the hearts and the minds of the population, is totally wrong on the part of the Congolese government. It is totally wrong. Rwanda would equally have the same reasons to create and construct an anti-Congolese narrative here. Given all this that I have mentioned, given their interventions, what they have done to us, supporting genocide, we would have the same reasons, but we have not. We do not demonize the Congolese, we do not point fingers at Congolese, we do not incite Rwandans against the Congolese. Any Congolese today will come single-handedly, move from border to any part of Rwanda. If he's attending school, if he's trading, walk alone, identify himself as Congolese or herself as Congolese, no Rwandan will touch him or her. No way. But this cannot happen to any Rwandese. No. Any Rwandese moving anywhere in the DRC, if you are identified, especially as a Tutsi, you will be molested, you will be killed, you will even be hacked and lynched and even eaten, cannibalized on. This has happened. It is a result of the whole of this phenomenon of demonization of anti-Tutsi construct as a tool to manage the Congolese opinion. The Congolese opinion. For us, the opinion we shape of the Congolese is that we need the Congolese people. We provide security for everyone. Congolese move here from border to Rwanda. If you check all the hotels around in Kigali, you will find they are fully packed with Congolese moving through here to Dubai, to East African countries. Nobody is touching them. They get all the facilitation, all the security. But the anti-Rwanda, particularly anti-Tutsi phenomenon constructed by Congolese politicians, is a very dangerous strategy. And once this is not uprooted, of course, whether M23 exists or if FDLR is eradicated, we cannot move on. And who will change this? It must be the leadership. It's the Congolese leadership that must understand the importance of living together.
On that point, General, the lynching and some of the points that you mentioned have happened. But it's also true, the population at large, Congo is a big place. Congo is the size of Western Europe. The larger population of Congo is being ready to have peace with Rwanda. We've seen President Kagame there was a good rapprochement between President Kagame and President Tshisekedi.
Yes.
The President Tshisekedi invited President Kagame to his father's funeral. You remember the president came to Kinshasa at the stadium. He was applauded when he came, when you look at the images and the video. So there's always a large reservoir of goodwill. Yes. And that goodwill has been true. Even as some of the issues that you raise happened, there was still this large reservoir of goodwill. There was goodwill when you showed up in 1996. There was goodwill even when Laurent Kabila left. The goodwill has always been a reservoir. The reservoir of goodwill has always been there. So the question is really, everything notwithstanding, how do we go from here to the peace point? Because Congo is a country of 100 million people. The average Congolese does not have, the politicians have used this, as you correctly pointed out, especially in the last election process. Mm-hmm. But the average Congolese who living in Kasai, who's living in Bandundu or elsewhere, is not blaming his problem or her problem on Rwanda. It may be something that politicians use. As you rightly pointed, they come here. If they were blaming everything on Rwanda, they will not come here. And it's also interesting, there's conflict between the two countries, but the borders are open. The embassies are open. So it's a very strange conflict.
It's a very strange conflict. The borders are open. Even with the current situation, I think at the Rwanda, Goma, Gisenyi border, not less than 10,000 people, not less than 10,000 people cross every day, even with the current situation. When the situation is normal, is peaceful, we have had good episodes of peace, the average has been 60,000. It is the most busy crossing point in the world, next to the Mexican-US border. 60,000 people crossing at the Goma-Gisenyi border.
I was just there 2 days ago.
Yeah, you saw the crossing, you saw people cross.
Beyond that, General, we saw Rwandan immigration officers working side by side with Congolese immigration in the same center.
So I agree with you. There is this, the Congolese population is only held hostage by the politicians. The politicians who have decided to pick the anti-Rwanda sentiment as a political tool for them to cling on power and to have explanation for their failures, governance failures. So for every failure, they will say it's Rwanda. And it has also degenerated and gone even bad, that such conflict has been exploited by politicians and high-level military officers, even for their personal gains. Some people are benefiting financially from the conflict. So it's
there's a war economy.
Yeah.
There's a war economy.
Yeah.
But where you stand today, there have been at least three or four processes of peace. Where do you need help? The two countries. Sometimes when brothers fight, they need somebody else to come. Is that happening?
For me, I think this problem could be solved without even a third party. Because earlier before, it has been solved without a third party. During Kabila's regime, the relations were not good. The same anti-Rwanda, anti-Tutsi sentiments played in 1998. They played in 2001. But by the time Kabila left power, the situation was getting better. Kabila, I remember he crossed over to Gisenyi, met our president. So the situation was not that bad. But the current leadership has worsened the situation that it will require much more effort to repair. This war of M23 was not created by Rwanda. No, it was not started by Rwanda, not at all, far from that. So whoever engineered this war, instigated this war, and for whatever reasons, I think he stands to blame and to take responsibility for that. Before President Tshisekedi came to power, he was talking with M23. They were exchanging. They were allies. Because according to them, the obstacle to both of them was the one who was in power, who was Kabila. So they were talking. This one I know very well, that Felix Tshisekedi and the M23 people were on good talking terms. When President Tshisekedi came to power in 2018, President Kagame was the chair of the African Union. He was in a good position to support President Tshisekedi, and he indeed supported President Tshisekedi. He supported him, demonstrated full support, as you said, by attending the funeral of his father in Kinshasa. That was a good gesture. But he also supported him worldwide, because President Tshisekedi was coming as a new person into power on the scene. Nobody knew him. Western capitals did not know him. International multilateral organizations, nobody knew him. So as a neighbor, as somebody that was seen to be close to President Kagame, he gave good recommendation everywhere, introduced him. So things were working very well. Even bilaterally, here, there were so many visits at different levels. Defense, security. There were so many errands between Kigali and Kinshasa. Rwanda Air started operating in Kinshasa. So, but we don't know where some bad undercurrent came from to pull the carpets and turn everything upside down. Rwanda did not play any role in starting this conflict with the DRC. What people forget is that Rwanda stands so much to gain from a peaceful environment between us and the DRC. Our trade, volumes of trade, interactions with people, they spike so high whenever there is a peaceful environment. So, if I take you back a bit, in 2013, there was this war between M23 and the DRC, in Eastern DRC. There was an international consensus that M23, FDLR, be defeated militarily by the UN force. It was called the Force Intervention Brigade, composed of Malawians, Tanzanians, South Africans, supported by MONUSCO. Rwanda was party to that. We agreed, we endorsed it. We endorsed it on the condition that the Force Intervention Brigade, after defeating M23, would embark on FDLR. That was the arrangement. Immediately after M23, the Force Intervention Brigade would attack FDLR. For us, attacking FDLR next after M23 was what we were waiting to see. Okay, the M23 gets defeated in 2013. It gets split into two groups. One group goes to Uganda, that is under Makenga, the current leader of M23. The other M23 comes to Rwanda. led by Bosco Ntaganda. We told Bosco Ntaganda that he would not be welcome to Rwanda because he was indicted by ICC and we would not accommodate him. So, given that ultimatum, he chose to hand himself over to the US Embassy and was transferred through Kanombe, through Kigali to The Hague. The rest of the M23s, we disarmed them. We took them to the far east, close to Tanzania, cantoned them there. We even made them denounce war. They signed with the UNHCR that they have denounced war. We also took their arms that we disarmed them of. We took the arms and handed them over to the DRC government through MONUSCO. We handed them over. In other words, we had an M23 here by 2018 that was totally disarmed, that had totally denounced war. So there was no problem. So when President Tshisekedi came to power, among other things that we discussed, that also was part of the discussion. And on the 19th of October 2019, the DRC delegation came here. They signed an agreement with the M23 that was here, disarmed, and they agreed that they would take them back to Congo and to resettle them. That was the agreement. So, in other words, for us, there has not been any problem of M23 with the DRC government. So, but later we waited for them to come and take them. They said that they had no budget to do so. No, we said no. You can pack them in the buses, drive them up to Goma. Oh, and they had no demands, no political demands, no military demands. All they needed was to go back. So we thought that was a very simple thing to do on the part of the DRC government. These are facts. These are facts. At the same time, they were also engaging Uganda over the M23 that was in Uganda. The M23 that was in Uganda had not been disarmed. They had kept their arms. So, but they also signed with the DRC government. In fact, for them, they also sent a delegation out of them to Kinshasa to go and discuss on the modalities of how they go back. So when the delegation that left Uganda of M23 to Kinshasa, they stayed, we understand they stayed in a hotel for 5 months and nobody talked to them until they escaped back to Kampala, to Uganda. So when they escaped back to Kampala, they moved from the camp where they had been camped in Uganda with their arms and positioned themselves in the Virunga Mountains. In the Virunga Mountains. Not on the Rwandan side. On the Ugandan side, adjacent to the DRC border. So we had nothing to do with the M23. Now, all of a sudden, with that relationship that was very smooth and going on very well between us and the DRC, some undercurrent comes up, we don't know where it came from, some opinion, anti-Rwanda opinion, takes precedence, and we see everything that we had been achieving with Tshisekedi is moving backwards, is in the reverse gear.
So that's where we are today.
That's how we are today. So now President Tshisekedi decides to launch a state of emergency in the Kivu and Ituri. We thought maybe the state of emergency was to fight FDLR because there was nothing else to fight. When he launches a state of emergency, he deploys military officers. You said I had been the CDS of DRC, so I know who is who. when we saw the officers that he deployed towards our border, we knew things were getting bad because the officers he deployed were particularly former Mobutist officers who have deep-seated hatred for Rwanda. In fact, the one he made governor for Goma was General Ndima, who had been the aide-de-camp of Mayere when they attacked us in 1990. So these are the people who harbor that vengeance attitude towards Rwanda. So the state of emergency took precedence, deployed all anti-Rwanda military officers. They took over from the civilian administration. The civilian administrators who were relating very well with Rwanda before. There was no interlocutor now. So that new military team immediately embarked on working with FDLR, integrating with FDLR. Now we are going back to square one. Things went bad. That's how things unfolded. So Kinshasa announced the Nairobi talks. The Nairobi talks were supposed to include all these rebel militia groups in Eastern DRC. Incidentally, there are around 250. There are so many. They were not created by Rwanda. No. They are created by ineffective governance systems. That's how those militia groups mushroomed. And now, so in the Nairobi peace talks, what does the DRC government do? Out of the room, they ejected out the M23. Yet the M23 was the only credible rebel group that needed to discuss through the Congolese dialogue. So they ejected them out of the room. When they were ejected out of the room, then the fighting started in Bunagana. Bunagana is not at the border with Rwanda, it's at the border with Uganda. So in response, in responding to that fight with M23, that did not come from Rwanda at all, that was not positioned anywhere near Rwanda, the DRC government decided to fire rocket bombs into Rwanda, into the northern part of Rwanda. They fired. They fired in March, they fired in May, they fired in June, consecutively. So it was a direct provocation to Rwanda. So what Rwanda did was to take defensive measures that protect our border. Until now, we have no interest at all in having war with DRC except protecting our border and not allowing FDLR to come next to our border after all that had happened.
General, this sounds like a very complex issue.
It's complex.
We thank you for joining us today and sharing your perspective. This is all the time we have today. We will have to continue this conversation when we have another opportunity.
It's a long one.
Thank you very much for joining us on Into Africa.
Thank you.